Hi, my name is Isabel, and I live in Parkland, where the shootings took place a couple of days ago. And I've sort of been hiding out a little bit because I've been really emotional for many reasons about the situation, as many, especially here, but across the country, are really in a state of shock and despair and mourning. But I want to kind of talk about something that has been tormenting me the past couple of days. Um, Valentine's Day, I woke up in the morning and, sorry about my squeaky chair. I woke up in the morning and my, sent my kids off to school. I went to my son's Valentine's Day ice cream party, and for those of you who know me, I'm like a total child. I don't care what, you know, I'm supposed to be as this mature adult. And I ran up to him. I swung him around. I held him tight and totally embarrassed him in front of his friends. And he was like, "Mom, Mom, Mom, you're embarrassing me." And I just love him so much that I needed to do that. And I go to lunch a couple hours later. Um, I start getting like a mass amount of texts and phone calls, like one right after the other, right after the other, and realized that the phone call came. There is a Parkland shooting right now. Your kids are in lockdown, and according to the Broward Sheriff's office, we need to keep all the children in other surrounding areas safe. My kids go to school about 2 blocks away from where the shooting took place. And my heart dropped. I was mortified. I couldn't believe that this was happening in a city that I call home, a city that we moved here to. I've always lived in South Florida. I was born and raised here, but in particular, Parkland is known as the number one safest city in Florida, and it's known for its good schools. And I kept thinking, how did this happen? And my kids were in lockdown. The whole time I kept thinking about that hug that I had given my son right before, and I was just praying that he was going to still be okay. The minute my kids got out of school, my son was locked in a bathroom with 22 or 23 other boys sitting on the floor of a bathroom for 3.5 hours. He's 8 years old. This should never happen. When I finally was able to pick him up and I had my daughters with me, I just sat on the couch with them, held them tight, and was so grateful that they were safe. And I was so absolutely devastated for the anger and pain that was occurring around me. And then as I'm feeling all of this pain and sadness for everything that has just transpired, and of course this city transformed, there were cops everywhere, helicopters flying overhead, there still are, and feeling this overwhelming sense, I was trying to block out all the media, and I turned on, finally looked at one of the news reports the next morning and realized that I knew the shooter. The details of it is not important. I did not know him very close, but a lot of people were familiar with him because he worked at the Dollar Tree locally. That's not how I knew him. I did see him there afterwards. I had met him a few years ago, more in a professional capacity, and which details I'm not going to explain or get into because it's really irrelevant. And but what I can tell you is that realizing that I knew this person and knowing what I know about him really started giving me this whole mix of emotions. And the reason why is because I knew him to be a very sad and tormented soul. His mom had expressed to me years ago that, He felt very isolated in school. He wasn't very well accepted. He felt bullied sometimes. He felt like people were not, making him feel like he belonged. And I guess that really led to a lot of his depression. I want to just be very clear from the get-go on this. I am not doing this video to try to defend his actions, to paint this picture that he was this wonderful kid. My limited interactions with him, which actually were several, but those interactions happened to be very positive, and which has made this very, very difficult to understand and grasp in so many ways. But let me get this very clear on the table right now. I am not defending his actions. I don't take away from the fact that his acts were heinous, inexplicable, just horrendous, evil acts that should have never occurred. He's obviously destroyed a lot of lives, not just the lives he took, but the lives of the people who love these individuals. But what I see now, the more I turn on the media, which is just horrible in and of itself, but you keep listening to, all these people talk about the red flags and how we should have turned him in beforehand, and how, these kids should have spoken out and done something about this, and led to further anger. And, there's been a bunch of things in different directions, and that's been part of it. The other, I think, main focus has been gun control. I think that's the overwhelming topic that's circulating right now, is gun control. I'm not negating either of these facts. I'm not negating that maybe there should be better mental health screenings. Maybe there should be a lot more gun control. I'm not, this discussion is not a debate about that. I'm not negating that, and I'm not going to perpetuate those conversations, because I think there's enough of those going around. But I guess my message is that I think a lot of people, I'm always the type of person to tell people how it is. And some of my friends love this about me. Some people isolate me because of it. But I'm never going to tell people just what they want to hear. I'm here to tell you how I see things and what I feel like could be the solutions to problems. And I think that this could have all been prevented. And it's not just a matter of gun control. I think that this could have been prevented with us as society, as human beings, about the way we treat each other and the way we make each other feel. And before I continue, I want you to understand that I perhaps, have a little bit of a different perspective because of my daughter. A lot of people know that my daughter, Catalina, is autistic, and she has autism. And about a year and a half ago, we had to go through one of the most, brutally emotionally unbearable situations we've ever had to go through. Basically, one day I got called and by the school and said, "You need to come pick up your daughter. She has trashed the classroom." And I didn't understand, I couldn't wrap my head around what was happening, because I know Catalina to be this sweet and loving and soul who has very high functioning autism. She's, genius IQ, very just amazing person. For those who know her, understand this to be true. So I couldn't comprehend what had just happened. And I ran into the school and I grabbed my daughter off the floor and I looked around and she had trashed the classroom. And at the time I kept saying, what happened? Talk to me. And she was just so angry that she couldn't stop and really fully articulate what had happened. And later that night, she was very calm and quiet, and she came to me, and you guys probably know that look on people's faces, especially parents when they're dealing with children, when the kids are so hurting inside, and they come to you with this like little bottom trembling lip, and they're so deeply in pain. And she came to me and said, "Mommy, I'm so sorry for what I've done, but today I was building Legos and my castle, I was very frustrated because my castle tipped over." And she explained the situation, but basically she got frustrated. And, for those who know anything about autism, a lot of kids can't deal with stressful situations. And it was stressful for her, so she kind of grabbed the blocks, threw them down, screamed, and a little boy walked over to her and said, "You are so savage. I don't know why you're here. You are so savage." And she's telling me the story, and her lip is still trembling and tears are flowing down her eyes. And she said, "And so, Mommy, I became savage." And at that moment, I just freaking lost it. I mean, this is a long time ago, so I'm able to kind of process through it without getting so emotional. But I realized that the way people were treating her was shaping her into who she was becoming. And she's already dealing with issues of her own, which is autism. And the way people were reacting was actually changing her behavior and changing the trajectory of the different kinds of situations that could have occurred. It could have gone this way, it could have gone this way, and her external environment was really shaping and molding that trajectory. And I started coming into the school a lot more. I remember a time that we were at the book fair, and she had written down the books on this little slip of paper that they were given. And she had, I don't know if, whoever knows about autism knows that they're perfectionists many of the time. And she had written the name of one of the books incorrectly. And so she started to vigorously erase it. And in vigorously erasing it, she tore the piece of paper. So she started to cry. She crumpled it up and she asked for another one. And her teacher said to her, "Only one per student. You get what you get and you don't get upset." And in her mind right now, it was so overwhelming and upsetting, and she was so upset. And this response just set her even more over the edge. She fell to the floor and started having a major episode and, kind of just swatting away anybody who tried to get close to her, including myself. And I looked over and saw one of the other moms. And if she's watching this, I'm sure a lot of people know and remember this day. And she grabbed her daughter and pulled her away from my daughter. Like, don't, let's isolate her even more. And she said to her, "Just stay away from Catalina." And in that moment, my heart broke, because what Catalina needed at that moment was sort of hope and love and understanding that this wasn't the end of the world, that there were other solutions to these problems, that there was help. It's such a minor thing, but giving her another slip would have been one step to change the entire course and trajectory of the rest of that day. And that didn't happen. What she was met with was resistance, unacceptance, and isolation, which led her to even more feelings of desperation and anger and depression. The rest of that day was a monumental disaster. And that was a year and a half ago. And all it took was one teacher. It's a catastrophe, like what happened for the rest of that week. The teacher wound up leaving. Other parents were angry. I've written about this in my blog a long time ago, called, I think the title was Senseless, and a lot of you guys have read it. But, I'm not going to go back into all the details of what happened, but it took one person who understood. She's not even ESE trained. She's not trained in all of this, but she came forward and she said, "I want to take this poor soul who has been through so much in her life already, and I want to change the trajectory of her life the rest of this year in kindergarten. I want to be the person who helps her and changes the outcome of the rest of this school year. And she did. She stepped up. She took her in under her wings. And Mrs. Berthium, if you're watching this, I will always, always be grateful to you for doing this, because I really don't know what would have become of my daughter, no matter how much love and support I was giving her at home. It wasn't enough. I can't protect my children for 24 hours a day. They will go to school. They will be apart from me. And it's up to the rest of society to help people who perhaps were not born with all of the blessings that the rest of us were born with. You know, not everyone is born of their right mind. Not everyone is born developmentally the same. And, you know, she came forward, and I didn't prepare for this video, so I'm sorry if it's scattered. I'm just trying to speak from the heart and to tell you how I feel. But Mrs. Berthium took her under her wing and accepted her and loved her and showed her that she's not a savage and that she is, you know, a good, kind soul. And what started happening the rest of the year was incredible. I mean, in her other class, kids went from not even wanting to go to her birthday party because they molded her into that angry and depressed and violent child, to, in this classroom, people begging to be, I want to sit next to Catalina at lunchtime. I want to be her buddy on this field trip. It literally went from one extreme to the other. And that's because she was met with kindness, compassion, openness to help her, and willingness to really take that time to make her feel like she belonged and was accepted, instead of rejected and isolated. And those things are so powerful for all human beings. I mean, one of our fundamental, you know, I didn't study this, but I can tell you just from experience that one of our fundamental, I think, needs as a human being is to feel like we belong, to feel like we are part of something. You know, it starts with family, but it spreads to all areas of our life. You know, we want to know that we belong to our class, that we belong to our school, that we belong with our peers. And when we don't have that feeling of belonging, it could lead to a lot of darker places that people can go to. And my daughter has experienced those things. That was a long time ago, and things just completely changed. But just about a month ago, I wrote a blog. I don't even remember what it's called, but I think it's called Do Good, or Turn It Around, Do Good, something like that. And in there, I had written one sentence that Catalina had come home, and that she expressed a level of pain that I was unable to kind of grasp and wrap my head around. And a lot of people, after reading that, texted me and asked me, what happened? Like, what happened to Catalina? Why was she in so much pain? And what had happened was, because that day she came home, her BCBA was working with her, and she was just angry that day. And it's so unlike her. She is the most loving and kind and good-hearted, good soul person you'll ever meet. But that day she was lashing out. She was angry. And I pulled her aside and I said, Catalina, just talk to me. I'm your mom. Please, I want to know what happened. I know that this is not you. I want to know. I want to help you. And she sat there for a few minutes, just kind of like not talking to me and angry. And all of a sudden, her whole affect changed. She started crying her eyes out. My mom was in the kitchen. She probably was worried to death because she could hear us both hysterically crying in the nanny's room downstairs, and she expressed to me that she had gone on a field trip that day, and the people she was paired with were communicating amongst themselves, and she was not part of that. She did not feel like she belonged. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, Mommy, it's so hard to explain, but I was invisible. I was invisible. I wasn't even there, Mommy. I'm their classmate, but that's all that they feel like, Mommy, they get it. They're together, but they don't understand me. So they make me feel invisible. And I don't know, sometimes I wish, and this was probably the worst feeling in the world. She said, sometimes I wish that God were to just take me away, because I don't want to feel like I don't belong here in this world. And at that moment, I just was bawling my eyes out. I couldn't even handle that my 7-year-old child was coming to me and telling me that she wishes God would take her away, because the pain that she felt in being isolated and different because of it, or different and isolated because of it, was so painful for her that the rest of the day she lashed out. And, that was her way of coping with it, because she didn't know how to cope with what she was experiencing. And I sat there and I told her, over and over and over. It was one of the most emotional nights I've had in the past couple of years. And I had to keep repeating, like, I love you. You're amazing. And it's not just because I'm her mom. It's because anybody that knows her, like, really has gotten to know her, knows this to be true. I mean, people have posted about her. People talk about her. She is one of the kindest souls in the world. And, I had to keep reminding her, like, I know you feel different. I know you feel isolated, and I know that this is terrible for you, but you have to keep, fighting through it. Understand that they don't understand. Yes, you're feeling like, Mommy, I'm invisible and they don't understand me. But Catalina, you have to have compassion and kindness for the people who treat you like that, because they too are very tormented about not knowing how to, maybe tormented is the wrong word, but they're at a loss because people don't understand what you're experiencing either. So it's a two-way street, but what you guys have to do is come together. Don't ever just, and I asked her, what did you do after that? And she said, well, I just kept to myself. I just stayed in my corner. And so she further isolated herself as a result, because she was already feeling isolated and misunderstood. And I've noticed that this is a vicious cycle with so many people in this world. And ironically enough, this is just mind-blowing, but ironically enough, I went to yoga the morning of Valentine's Day, and something came over me. I'm like a total empath, and something came over me during yoga, and I felt the need to express my gratitude for the three of the people who have been probably, not isolated, have, given me hope and given me kindness and influenced me in a positive way. And so I grabbed my friends, Laura and Alexis and Sarah. They all work at the yoga joint. And I said to them, and I guess they were worried. They're like, oh no, what is she going to say to us? And I just said, you guys, I love you guys. And I just wanted to express my gratitude for having you, because I feel like I isolate myself a lot. And, I feel like I do that because I don't really have too much hope in humanity anymore. There's so many bad souls out there that just don't have, shiny, bright hearts and souls. And the three of you guys are three of those people. So I want to express how grateful I am to have you in my life. And I love you guys. And all of us kind of hugged and had this moment. And Laura, who is the founder of Samaritan's 365, which is a nonprofit organization which does amazing things. Her mantra is, and she shared this with me for years now, but her mantra is gratitude, compassion, and kindness. Gratitude for what you have, compassion for those around you who might not be having a good day or may not have all the love and support that they need, and kindness to reach out to those people and perhaps cause a positive difference in their lives and therefore a chain reaction to spread more kindness. And she, after we had this hug session and love session, she pulled me aside and she said, Isabel, I don't want you, although I'm so flattered by, and grateful for you as well, I don't want you to lose hope in humanity. I want you to look at those dark souls that you described and not think of them that way. Have hope for them and open your heart and love them and accept them and show them gratitude, compassion, and kindness. And you'll see that we can turn things around. And it's mind-blowing to me that just a few hours later, all of this devastation happened. And all the parents who are going to watch this understand, and who had other kids in lockdown will fully understand that during those hours, they were some of the most heart-wrenching and desperate hours of our lives. I can't even imagine the kids who were actually at Stoneman Douglas and hearing the shots being fired and not knowing, like, am I going to see my parents again? Am I next? I can't even claim that I fully understand it, because when I think about it, I get a knot in my throat. But I knew that my kids that are very young, and knowing what they were going through was so heart-wrenching that they were in lockdown for 3.5 hours. During those 3 hours, I must have thrown up like 3 to 4 times. I was actually physically ill. Like, I couldn't even process what was happening. And I was desperate to make sure that, I don't know how much details you guys know about this, but the shooter had left the school. He hadn't been captured yet. All the schools were in lockdown for the safety and protection of those children, because nobody knew what would happen next. And I'm grateful for all the schools keeping the rest of our children safe, but we didn't know what would happen. And it was a very emotionally treacherous situation. As the news releases, as we started to hear reports of how many fatalities there were and how many injuries there were, my heart was breaking. I know some of these people. I am not taking away from the grief and the desperation and the agony of this horrible and heinous episode that should have never occurred. None of this should have ever occurred. But I don't believe that the one and only answer here is gun control. I don't believe that the one and only answer here is mental health screenings. Yes, I think that both of those are paramount components of this, but this is a very broken situation. This is a very, everybody wants to talk about the red flags that they saw in Nicholas, and I don't disagree with that. But in my opinion, and I know I'm going to probably get a lot of pushback for this, but it's so much deeper than that. It's a matter of us coming together as, and the betterment of humanity. I know that that is such a broad statement, but things like making sure that that person who is sitting alone in the cafeteria is no longer sitting alone. Making sure that when you see somebody having a bad day, and this doesn't just translate to our children, this translates to, people, adults. One day I was at this, trunk show, and somebody walked in. She was being a heinous person, and just one of my friends looked at me and said, God, she's on like a bitch roll today. And although I agreed and understood this perspective, I actually said to her, maybe she just had a really bad day. Like, maybe she just had a fight with her husband. Maybe her son or daughter came home crying today, and maybe this is the way that she is lashing out. And instead of me like walking away from her and thinking, let's just avoid the bitch over there, I actually walked up to her and I was like, hey, how are you doing? Is everything okay? And she started explaining, and I was right. She had had a totally awful day, and just having that conversation with her and letting down her guard, you could see that the way she conducted herself the rest of the evening was a different person. And I agree that what Nicholas did was evil and horrible and heinous. And I also agree, I'm not defending him. I don't want people to be outraged and think like, I texted my friend yesterday and I said to her, and this is like one of the very few people in this world that I actually love and respect, and I had been crying like for 24 hours straight, and I said, I need to tell you something. I knew the shooter, and I didn't know him well, but I explained how I knew him, and I explained the few interactions that we had had, including this one time. It's so hard to laugh through the tears, but this one time, like, he helped me scheme on getting like all these ghosts like set aside for me for Halloween, and it was a funny memory, and I kept thinking like, how could this same person do all of this? And it did make sense because I knew his health history and I knew what was going on. But she said to me, and I said, today I am praying, I am praying so hard for his troubled soul. And she immediately shot back at me and said, how about you pray for all of the people's lives he destroyed? And I just sat there and started crying even more. The thing is, one does not negate the other. I don't have to, not show compassion and grief for somebody who obviously was so broken and so desperate. For me, the solution is not to just spew more anger and hatred towards the world. It's to have a little more, to understand how perhaps this could have been prevented, and therefore how perhaps we can prevent other episodes from happening in the future. And that's not just gun control, and it's not just mental health screenings. It's a matter of, identifying when someone is broken on the inside and asking yourself the question, how can we help heal? How can we all help heal each other a little bit more instead of hurting each other a little bit more? When you see that someone is quiet or awkward or talking about things that perhaps they should not be talking about. I think at one point, like Catalina in school a year and a half ago, she like created this like little noose and pretended like she was hanging a princess, and everybody was like, oh my God, she's hanging somebody. And Catalina literally, if I see a cockroach in the house, which thank God in this house I don't, but if I do, she's the first person that's like, don't kill it. Oh my God, mommy, just make sure it's safe and take it outside, because that is her. But at those moments, people lash out. And instead of, thinking to yourself, let's whisper about this person and let's make them even more isolated and more broken, we should be embracing them. And if they're really truly psychologically fucked up, then get them help. Don't further add to the problem. It doesn't make sense to me, and it never will. And no matter how many people come at me and say he was evil, and yes, his behavior was evil, his actions were evil, but I truly fundamentally believe that nobody is born evil. Our environment, yes, maybe some people are born with mental health issues, but the way that people react around us and the way people, accept us or reject us, or the way in which people make us feel like we belong or don't belong, will ultimately form the trajectory of our lives and the trajectory of our own behaviors. And we have the power as humans, as individuals, as part of the society, to help form each other and help each other and lift each other up and help each other, instead of making the situation worse. You know, we're so quick and easy in this situation to be throwing stones, but you know, like that verse says, you know, he who is without sin, let them cast the first stone. It's so true. Like, we are all part of the problem, and things are not going to change until we step up and take responsibility of our own small part in how this happened, and what perhaps it's too late now. It's too late to go back and change what happened a couple days ago, which is going to ruin and affect the lives of many people forever. But it is our obligation, and it's my hope that some people see this video and perhaps change their mindset and change the way that they treat others and perceive others, and increase your level of compassion and kindness and help people instead of hurt them, because that hurt can lead to sadness. The sadness leads to isolation. Those feelings of isolation lead to feelings of anger. The feelings of anger lead to feelings of desperation. And unfortunately, in those extreme cases, those feelings of depression and anger and isolation and desperation will then lead to inexplicable violence. And it seems like such a monumental task. You know, I could be saying this, like, people need to change, you know, the world needs to change, and it's such an onerous task, but don't we have the responsibility as human beings to at least try, at least attempt? One person trying to make this difference can create this ripple effect that travels through the world. You know, Laura always tells me, like, you know, people say, like, oh, this kindness stuff right here is not going to affect the world, but it does, because it starts like that and it spreads. And, you know, I'm not saying that, once again, I want to be very clear. I am not justifying the actions of Nicholas. I am not, you know, excusing the actions. I am not saying it is our fault. He made the choice. His behavior was his own choice. We did not force him to do that. That was his choice. But what I am saying is that now it's our choice and our decision to change our behaviors in the way that we treat others, because the same chain of reactions of his emotions can lead to other children and other adults having that same chain of reactions that lead to catastrophic, you know, violent, heinous crimes and events that could have been prevented. So I'm asking us all today, I know it's so difficult, and there's so many people who are just upset and angry. You know, I went to a vigil last night. It was just heart-wrenching. And I don't even, like, I've tried to disconnect from so much of the emotion, because I feel like myself, I could go into a dark place, and I don't want that. You know, people crave belonging. They crave human interaction. They crave acceptance. And I just implore you on this day, instead of just feeling so angry and pointing fingers and saying, you know, this is what should, if we had better gun laws, or if we would have turned him in sooner, or, you know, whatever the case. Yes, maybe those things would have helped. I don't know. I don't think you know either. You know, it's completely impossible to, you know, to know that. We cannot predict that that's what would have happened, or know that that's what would have happened. But what I can tell you is that I know for a fact, because I've experienced it in my own life with Catalina, that the way we treat people and, you know, are giving people hope and giving people love and giving people acceptance, those people who are so broken on the inside, really makes a world of difference. I've experienced it myself, so I know what I'm talking about. I know that a lot of people might even watch this video and be angry because maybe some people still are chanting to burn him at the stake. And once again, this video is not intended to be a pro-Nicholas video. I agree, what happened was awful, but let's make this never happen again. And it does start with us, and it does start with loving and kindness and acceptance and helping people who need help. We're not all blessed. We don't all, we're not all born with the perfect mindset. We're not all born with parents who love us and accept us and nurture us and give us that safe environment. We're not all born with these blessings. So for those of us who are not born perfect, let's try to change the environment around them so that nobody ever feels isolated and whispered about and told things like, oh, like people were even admitting that they said to him, oh, you're going to be the one who shoots up the next school. Like, that blows my mind. Those things are exactly what lead to the heinous crimes. That one little boy who was 5 years old and walked over to my daughter in kindergarten, no less, and said to her, you're a savage, because she couldn't understand that her Lego structure was not perfect, and said, you're a savage. Why are you even here? You don't belong in this classroom. That one thing that this little boy said to her led to her becoming a savage, led to her destroying the classroom. And it perpetuated until, like I said, a couple of people, especially my angel for life, stepped up and said, I am going to take this person under my wing, and I'm going to show her love and acceptance and hope that this is not how things have to be. And like I said, for everybody who's in her class now, they would not even be able to comprehend that that's who she was back then. And all it took was everyone around her, her environment changing. So on this day, please, yes, mourn the loss of everyone. I can't even talk about, I'm internally shaking right now. And those who know me know, because they've told me, stay home, Isabel, you're too upset. But I'm very broken for my city, this safe city that I moved here for my neighbors who have lost children, for my friends who have lost a child. I am sorry. My heart is broken for you. I am sorry for the kids who lost their brothers and sisters. All of it is a tragedy. It is a horrible, horrible tragedy that should have never occurred. But I do believe that we can change this. So please, if this makes a difference in anyone's life, please, before you sit there and judge other people, whether it's that person who walked in and was on a bitch rage, instead of isolating her, reach out to her, talk to her, see what happened. Have compassion and understanding and kindness so that can change, that child who is sitting angry in the corner and isolated. Reach out to them, say, be part of us. We as parents also have the absolute responsibility to instill these values in our children. And I am going to beat these values into my kids. I'm going to beat them into them, because it starts at a young age. And I want to make sure that my kids understand to never, I would never be that parent that pulled her daughter aside and said, stay away from Catalina, because she was having a tantrum about her ripped paper. That's just awful to me. Teach them about love and compassion and understanding and acceptance before it's too late for many other people, before more people have to undergo this tragedy. Please, I beg of you, just share this message. I could care less about fame. I don't want to be, I don't care about going viral. I want this message to go viral, and the fundamental, meaning behind it, because I feel like it could affect a lot of people. I'm a hermit, so I don't really care how many people see me, but I want this message to be spread everywhere because I truly feel like if people change their mindset and treatment of others, it will make a world of difference and prevent horrible, heinous tragedies like this from occurring again. Thank you for listening. I love everyone. I have huge hope for humanity. And anyways, I hope this reaches a lot of people. So please, please share the message as much as you can. And I implore you to have the change start with you.